as you all know, and he's the reason I'm here. I thank you so much. And forgive me, I've been given 7 minutes to talk. I can barely say my name in 7 minutes, so I'm going to go really, really quickly and cover as much ground as I can. Now, let's make sure everything is working. Yes. So, what could be more important than openness and transparency? Very little. You know, let me just give you a backdrop. With all of in the wake of the Edward Snowden revelations, which you might think are, and they are, primarily related to privacy issues, they're equally related to issues relating to openness and transparency, or the complete lack thereof. And I can't tell you how this has affected my business. I mean, to say that interest in privacy and access to information has tripled is really not an exaggeration. Just for your information, these are the 3 acts that we oversee compliance with in Ontario: the Freedom of Information and Protection Act, its municipal counterpart, and the Personal Health Information Protection Act. I'm not going to go into them, but we oversee compliance with these. We take it very seriously. We conduct investigations and appeals relating to access to information, and we pursue all of the issues that come before us with such a vigilance, I can't tell you, because to me, nothing is more important than freedom. And you cannot have free and democratic societies without access to government records. It's one goes with the other. No, I missed a... Yes, government must be accountable. So this slide is, I think, at the heart of what I'll be talking to you about, because the right of access to government-held records, this is a given. The next line, I read this somewhere in the Globe many, many years ago, and it just always stayed with me, that the government is there at the pleasure of the governed. Or that's the theory. That's how it's supposed to be. The government they're representatives of us, members of the public. So we should have access to all government-held records. And I'm referring to general records. Let me just make the one disclaimer. There's a complete difference with personally identifiable records, which are related to privacy interests, and general records, which are policy-related, administrative, the decision-making of government, the general records. So all my comments relate to general records. With respect to those, we should have complete access to those with very limited exceptions that are outlined in the acts. Openness and transparency. To say that this is the bedrock of democracy, I mean, it says too little. You cannot have a notion of freedom and democracy without openness. How can you hold government accountable if you don't know the activities they're engaged in, if you can't have access to the records that they're working with? Absolutely critical. And this is a dance we've been doing with government for many years. This is my 3rd term, probably one too many, but I'm in my 3rd term, and I've worked with governments of all political persuasions, and nothing changes, in my view. Governments are very committed to doing the right thing, but once there are enormous pressures, as you might imagine, that tend to strain the government's actions at times. You may be familiar with 2 reports that I issued this summer. One, I called it Deleting Accountability: Records Management Practices of Political Staff, because I was really appalled. And the media called it a scathing report. I guess it was scathing. It was certainly very critical of the practices that we noticed under the former government in terms of political staff deleting emails routinely on a regular basis. And the answers that we got for why they were doing this, engaged in this practice, were things like, we like to maintain a clean desk policy. Now, I don't know how that struck you, but you might imagine how it struck me, which was not very credible. In fact, I said it strained credulity. Are you kidding me? These staff, the political staff, are crazy busy. They're running around, they're putting out fires, and they're worried about keeping their inbox clean? It's ridiculous. And so I was very, very upset about what I found, and I believed it was associated with a wish to conceal the activities of the government relating to the gas plants and the decisions made relating to those. You can read the reports yourself. So we made a number of recommendations, as you might imagine, and these are, I think, the most important things I'm going to say to you today. These are the recommendations that appear in the Act. Create a legislative duty to document and make it legislated, so it's part of the Act, and it's real. So this could exist at a policy level, which I believe already exists at a policy level, but unless it's legislated, it does not have the same import. Require that every institution subject to the acts define, document, and put into place reasonable measures to securely retain records that are or may reasonably be subject to an access request under the acts. See, this is so important, and this is directly related to your work. There has to be a requirement for documents to be retained securely and preserved. This certainly exists, the theory exists, but nowhere could I point to it in our legislation. And so that's why we're asking for legislative changes. 3 is to prohibit the willful destruction of records that are subject to or may reasonably be subject to an access request under the acts. And you might say, well, of course that already exists. It doesn't exist. It does not exist in the acts. And that is what we witnessed in this investigation, that there was willful destruction and an attempt to conceal that. And for make it an offense under the acts for any person to willfully destroy. If you don't make it an offense, if there are no serious hard consequences, then what's the disincentive to doing that? These are very important recommendations, I believe, and we've made them to the government, and we've made a number of other recommendations as well, and I've had a positive response from the government thus far. With respect to the non-legislated recommendations that we made in our report, we've had this positive response that the actions we are announcing address the Commissioner's non-legislative requirements. So we've had a very positive response to the non-legislative requirements from MGS, developing a mandatory training program for all political staff to ensure that staff are fully aware of their obligations. See, one of the things that was said to me was, well, why aren't you, Commissioner, out there training people on what to keep and not to keep? Excuse me, because it's not my job. That's why. I've got a lot of duties, which I perform, I think, very seriously. I've never been asked to do this before. I would be happy to do it, but it has never been on our table. It's never been our job. Happy to do it, but we have to do it. The response that, well, the political staff didn't know better, please. I mean, what planet are you coming from? You know what you should and shouldn't do. So, but having said that, then they've agreed to create a mandatory training program. We're delighted. The second thing, create a working group of Premier's office staff, Cabinet office staff, MGS staff, to clarify and strengthen the government's records retention policies and practices so that they can be successfully put into place in practice. Great. We're delighted with the government's response to that. So we've got 2 other things that I asked for that they've agreed to: appointing ministers, chiefs of staff, and the Premier's chief of staff as the persons accountable, holding them accountable for the implementation and compliance with records management policies. Again, this seems like motherhood. This sounds obvious, but it was lacking. There was no one responsible that you could point to who was accountable for doing this. And so this is a significant step. And finally, improving archiving requirements by conducting a review of the archiving schedules. And again, we've had agreement on that. And we would be happy to work with you with respect to the archival aspects of this. We're not experts in archives at all. We value the archiving of information, the enormous benefits to the public in doing so. And so we hope very, very much that this will take form in terms of actionable steps, but I think in working with you, the likelihood of that happening will be much more successful. So we look forward to working with you. Now, I just want to give you a statement from Premier Wynne, because it was very positive, and she said that our government remains committed to strengthening and improving our records management practices. We're committed to being open, transparent, accountable. So that I see as very positive. They want to work with us to enhance transparency and public accountability as we move forward. And in order to do that, you must have the archival aspects, the retention of these documents documented in both paper, of course, but in digital electronic form. That's the future. How do you address some of the wonderful comments that Laurel made in her comments in terms of the changes that are happening to software And how do you preserve this well into the future without concerns that the software is going to change so the data are lost? All of these are vital issues that have to be addressed. I'm going to end by just telling you, just 2 more minutes, Ian. Access by design. I probably exceeded my 7 minutes. I don't even want to look at my watch. Access by design, this is something we developed a few years ago. And it's all about making governments more transparent and pushing the data out. So if you think of pull and push technologies online, a pull technologies, I have to go to a website, know what website to go to, and extract the information that I'm looking for and find it. And sometimes that can involve a heavy search. You know, no one has that kind of time. You don't know where to look. Things are buried. Not good. Under the existing Freedom of Information process that we have in place, which is excellent, people still, it's like a pull technology. They have to apply, they have to put in an FOI request to the right government department, request access to a particular document. You know, the government department has 30 days to respond, and I mean, it can go back and forth, take forever. It's good, it's important we have it, we can do better. So access by design, I came up with this because it mirrors privacy by design that we developed many years ago, which has been made an international standard in 2010, translated into 35 languages. It's all about being proactive, about embedding privacy protections into the design of technology and operational processes. So I thought, let's mirror that as best we can on the access side so that the data are pushed out. So people don't have to know what they want or where to go or figure it out. You push it out. You can take entire classes of information that are non-personally identifiable, no privacy issues, and put it out on websites. Just drive it out in ways that are easily accessible, so you've got excellent reference tools for people to find information they want. Here are the 7 principles of access by design. Again, it's proactive. You don't wait for the FOI request to come in. You push out data, entire classes of data, make it accessible. You embed the processes into the design you're working with. Openness and transparency are just key to this because you cannot hold governments accountable if the information that you need isn't available. Governments have to be open, they have to be transparent, and this is, again, getting a lot of interest now as a result of Mr. Snowden's revelations. This is really going to explode. And I believe today at 11 o'clock, President Obama is making an announcement on the recommendations that he's going to accept or not, or whatever he's going to do in terms of the review panel's recommendations. So today will be an important day. But it's all about accountability and holding governments accountable. We believe by doing this, it also fosters collaboration with different groups. You put it out there. And in turn, that will enhance, I believe, efficient government, not just government operations, but enhance efficiency. We just, you know, we talk about access to information, and often people say, look, it's not really accessible. Maybe you've got this FOI process in place, but it's not truly accessible. So it's all about making the information truly accessible to the public, to citizens, who I constantly remind the government it's their information. It's not your information. You may have custody and control of that information. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the public. It's their information. Make it available to them. And I also think the bonus in this is it increases the quality of the information, because if people have access to information, they can address issues where there's inaccuracies, flaws, they can bring it to the government's attention, corrections can be made. There's a benefit to all. So take a look at our access by design materials, and I should tell you, a lot of the municipalities are driving this out. Our province, we have a wonderful program in place that they're starting working in this area in terms of open government and open data. So I'm very optimistic. Let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by just repeating my message again and again on the importance of openness and transparency. Nothing could be more important to freedom, I believe, than this. And the work that you do as archivists to preserve data, to preserve information now and well into the future is invaluable. Citizens have a complete right to know what their governments are doing. You look at, I'm sorry I keep referring to the U.S. Experience, but it's not just the NSA. Our Canada's CSEC, just as bad. We have been just as complicit as the NSA in accessing people's information, records, and hiding. Believe it or not, we have less transparency than the NSA does. At least they've got the FISA court. You may not think it's good enough, which it isn't, but it's going to be fixed. They've got the FISA court. We don't have an equivalent to that. Our commissioner, who is a retired judge, reports through the defense minister. There's no independence here. There's no power to look at things independently. I at least have the ability. I'm an officer of the legislature, so I don't report to the government of the day. I report through the speaker to the legislature consisting of all three political parties. That gives me enormous independence. That is not matched or mirrored elsewhere. And finally, openness and disclosure. When we talk about making something the default condition, we know from the academic literature, and I love being here that this is being held at U of T. I did all my graduate work here, and I will never forget the things I learned. Wonderful, wonderful training. When you make something the default setting, the default condition, what that means is 80%, the academics tell us 80% of whatever the default is, that is the condition that will prevail. So 80% of the time, the default condition prevails. We want that to be openness and transparency. Let's make access the default condition, both here in our province and hopefully across Canada. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.